Hi, this is Kim Edwards. We're going to do another UV tutorial, and this time we're going to do a Greek amphora that I modelled with you, modelled for you to use as an exercise. So if you open up the start file and just isolate the amphora itself, you will see that this is what we've got to work with. So there's some faces on the inside here that we should be aware of, and then there's this handle here, and then the actual main vase itself. So the point of this one really is to draw your attention to having clearly in mind what you want to do with your texture, because that's going to affect the way that you do UVs. If I just went ahead and kind of focused on, doing unfolds and so forth, I could end up with a kind of wonky projection on this that may not really suit doing a texture like we can see on some of these vases here, so with clear little figures going across. But can you imagine making a mural that bends perfectly along conforming with this? I can't. It'd be crazy to do so. So the point is that we should be focusing on what we want to do with the texture. This is what I want to do with the texture. I want to put murals on. So rather than overcomplicating it, what I need to do instead is forget about the unfolding. The handle is an exception, but let's focus on just doing a simple projection. So obviously the obvious choice is on this main part, not including the handle sections. Is to do a cylindrical projection. And that's very logical because, and I'll include here as well, even though we're all separated, that's a very logical choice because it'll keep all of these lines here where we want to put our mural, or freize or characters, perfectly horizontal. So cylindrical mapping, that's done. Just move this out of the way. And then we'll grab the handle sections and just project planar mapping on Z onto those, and we will unfold that. Do that in a second. I do need to, a handy little thing in here is if you're unsure if things are overlapping each other, if you put shade UVs on, it shows you blue faces that are the normals are pointing correctly and red ones that are pointing incorrectly, and so if you've got sort of reddish purple, then you know they're overlapping. So this is more purple than red, in which case I know anyway I should be trimming this around there. So I'll just cut that. Cut UV edges, which will allow me to grab a shell of, just control right click to change selections from one thing to another, so I'll go to UV shell, and that will allow me to go to UVs in here and move this out of the way, flip that around, grab an edge. I can manage to grab one. Just grab one of these edges, put symmetry on in my select tool, which is probably confusing things. So just grab one of these edges and should see that highlighted somewhere, and then just go move and so. Let's join those back together. I'll put this in my grid area in a second. Just deal with the handle next. So that's nice and simple, because if I did put a texture on it, so for example, if we just look at the initial pattern that I sort of borrowed, if I just assign that to a material, you'll see that it sits rather nicely. Just delete the history to get to the Lambert even more easily. Boom. So if I project that straight on, we can see already that this was a far more suitable decision than another choice. and having to warp things. Yeah, so we need to sort of factor in our texture making, absolutely, when we lay out the UVs. Just like when I modeled this, I made sure that I made sure that this had a loop going on the inside and outside in case I did want to unfold it. So let's do that next. So this has already been trimmed around, I'm guessing around that edge here. And if we now trim it in the least obvious place, which is down the center here, we should be able to unfold that. Whoopsie doopsie. Made a bit of a bugger up there. Yep. People get RSI. Okay, so that's now been trimmed. I haven't got anything else, so I'll just cut that edge, cut UV edges. Good-o. Just double check I did that. Cut UV edges. And then if we are unfolding this, we need to give it a little bit of latitude and trim maybe around, I'm guessing it's here, and there. So, yep, so cut UV edges, and same thing down here. So, some. Alright, so now if I do an unfold on just that, zoom on now onto that. That should be good to go. The most visible sections, which is this middle part, and sides. So along here, don't have a seam, and got the seam down the middle there. So that's good. So now what I'm going to do is we'll just lay things out. So we need to fit this inside of the square here, both of these things. Just do an automatic layout initially. See what it comes up with. And I do want to make the most of my texture area, so I'm going to, thanks for laying it out, Maya, but I will scale it now. So fit in the area. So just using with the scale tool, I just press D to toggle editing the pivot, and V to snap to point, just to get the point down to there. And we'll just scale it out. I think I prefer to scale my, if need be, that is, prefer to sort of warp my texture slightly. Make sure that's at 1. I'm going to put this kind of in an area where I feel like, just check which is the top and which is the bottom. That's the bottom, so I'll just flip this around. Boom, boom, boom. And we'll move it over where the actual handle is going to sit. And I think we're ready to go into Photoshop. So this is a very simple kind of layout. We've done some unfolding on the handle, but we've left this so that we've got nice horizontal lines. Just take note, visually I'll just turn off the texture here. I'm just going to turn off the shade UVs as well. So this is probably kind of going to be the line along here. If I get out of this, maybe a bit lower where I want to have our little characters. Yep. So UV snapshot time from object mode, and this is something we can now take into, I'll just do 2048, take into Photoshop. I'll just call this demo UVs. So we'll quickly go over making a texture next. G'day, so over in Photoshop now, I'm just going to make myself a kind of terracotta base colour. Plot my UVs on top, that's where the handle is. I've already identified that it's around this area here that I'm probably going to want to have our freize. So I started off, I've given you a few assets to work with, so I started off with this. I wanted to pull out these kind of shapes. I don't want it to be in a black vase, so I just use select color range and color pick the sepia tone here. Then made a new solid. Had a look at that. Probably adjusted it a little bit more than that. Just invert my selection there, Control-Shift-I. Backspace to black that out, and that's what I ended with, which has already been done for you. So to my mind this is the most important thing, so I'm just going to pop this in, just drag it into new window and drag it on into my scene. I'll just change this background color a little bit so we can see where things are. So for me the most important thing with this was getting these guys in the right spot and the right kind of aspect. So I'll put my UV reference up there locked and just eyeball moving these around. So to check this in Maya, even though I wouldn't want to render with a multi-layered TIFF, I'm going to save this as a TIFF with layers, so I can keep loading into Maya and keep returning to it. At this stage, obviously, as well, you probably want to save your file. So now, just load in to the existing material here. That TIFF, which I've got demo TIFF, and I want to focus on checking out where it is, and whether it's in the right spot, whether they seem to be a little bit stretched or not. So I think they could be scaled in possibly a little bit, look a little bit wider than I would want them. So it's a bit of a back and forth game for important little things like this. I did get it in the right place, luckily. Save, back in Maya. I've got more than one Maya open. Click on the file and reload and check. Yep. So I want to identify, if I'm looking at the vase from the side here, I want to identify which face is bang in the middle, so it looks like it's that one there. That's fairly logical, so I want to have these definitely sitting there nicely. So quickly over in Photoshop, put my grid back on. If I'm going to have two of these, which I think I am, I'll just duplicate that one and I'll just scale this. So I'm going to put the thing there and change the width to -100, and they should both hopefully, just double check which one is exactly in the middle. So it's pretty much in the middle. So I think this line here marks the middle, so I'll move both of these across. So that's sitting snugly there. So that's that. I made another pattern using, I've given you a few things here. I found this little Greek shapes number. So I grabbed one of these and went define pattern. So zoom on in on one of them. I've forgotten which one I did exactly use, but just as an example, look at this one. Grab what you are interested in and then go to define pattern. And then you'll find that you can use your paint bucket tool, change it from foreground to pattern. There's the one I made earlier. Here's the one I just made there in front of you. And you can see I can now just bucket fill a pattern. So I've made a pattern that I've cut out as well, place that in the right area, and then grabbed some other images, so this one for kind of a base texture, paste that on in, and wherever I move that to, actually, doesn't look like I did copy that. So, scale that up. Getting a bit of lag, I think I've got too many things open. Not as badly as this. Used colour picker to get a nice colour happening. Just close that. Close that. So I colour picked one of these, made some grit. And let's pause for a second. Sorry, my computer just lagged terribly for a second. Too many things open. So essentially, for these patterns, I just kind of layered them up together, flatten things. You can use this handy little tool here, patch tool. Make a selection, and then drag. And it will do a nice smooth transition between them. I just coloured this by colour picking, just close things as I go. By colour picking other images I was interested in, so that gives me a nice terracotta kind of colour, just solid colour over the top here, and just throw a colour over that. Yep. And what I also did is, just Control E to merge things. What I also did is I added some layers of some of the more textural assets that I've given you. So this one and this one, for example, which looks a bit splotchy. And just brush them in. So I used a blending mode for them, for example. So let's say this one's on an probably not an overlay, because I want the lighter parts, probably a soft light or something, or even a screen might do the trick if I fiddle with the levels just a little bit. And then, you know, you can mask things out as well. So if I did have something I wanted to add this, for example. Just define a pattern quickly. So if I did want to kind of introduce this, we'll just ignore the seams for the moment. I could invert it and brush in, put my reference at the top here, brush in where I wanted to have some of this come in. So just by choosing a brush and brushing white into my mask where I wanted to have some of this kind of more filthy stuff come in. So the seam of the bottle up here and so forth and so on. And then it's basically back and forth save, making sure you've got things in the right place. And then when I was happy with that, in order for it not to have a seam on the side, so for example, I'll just say this is pretty bad, but I'll just say this as another reference. Pop it back into Maya once it's finished. Make an object mode, delete the history, we'll reload the texture. So just having a look here, I made a bump as well. My thing's off center, but if we spin around, there should clearly, it's not too bad, but you can see clearly visibly where the edges are. The projection is what you call a seam, so just along here. So that's something you want to be able to avoid, and I think we've covered it already, but I'll just show you one more time. So under filter other, there is an offset function. So if I offset by say 450 pixels, and I'll just trim this image as well, just to make sure we don't have any leftover stuff. So there's my offset. It's offsetted by, let's go 450. Yep. And then same tool I was using before, which is this great patch tool. Just drag a nice kind of generous section over here and set to source. Just drag left. And then we basically do the reverse offset. Deselect that. It's a little bit sharp there, you can go and fix things up. But I'll just do a reverse offset this time, so other offset. This time I'm going minus 450. And you'll find now that our seam has magically disappeared. So definitely handy. So my final one, I spent more time than just demoing this. Looked like, I don't think I've kept all of the layers. No, I haven't. But I had a little bit of white sort of skank on the top. I've brushed some other things in. Got some other pattern there. And then ended up with our final render. But what I want you to take away from that is thinking about what you're doing with your texture when you lay out your UUVs, and make it easy to achieve that. And you can balance having a little bit of scaling and warping on your image, as long as it's easy to do, to correct any aspect kind of funkiness that you might get without having a smooth or unfold function on your UVs. Right, I hope that was useful.